Curb Servers, the original block, episode 1, raw and unedited. Now, last episode, if you go back to the block, episode 8, I introduced some of the characters from the original block. Yeah, I introduced my Aunt Teresa, and she had a husband, Maestro, with his kids, Jamal and Michael, my cousins, and all their cousins was like my cousins. I also talked about my Aunt Terry and her son, my cousin Robbie. I talked about my Aunt Gina and her tribe of children, my cousin Jolly and my cousin Jabs. You know, my cousin Frankie, my cousin Renee, my cousin Hopperdink. So, but there was plenty of characters on the original block that I still didn't mention that we had developed their characters over time. For instance, my cousin Sherry, she stayed on the block. This is how she got to Los Angeles. My cousin Ruben, the corner man at the store, at the corner store who sold the weed, the original weed man, Mr. Dixon. Now, yeah, my pops was on the original block. See, my mom and my pops, they met in Compton. See, I was born in Compton on 130th and Wilmington. And according to my pops, he always tells me, like, yeah, I was fresh out of Vietnam. Yeah, I was one of them soldier niggas. And your mama, she cracked me. He said, yeah, I was interested in your mama. And, you know, it was her and a bunch of little fly little of her homegirls. And he said that he was looking and he had on his fatigue stuff. And a couple of her homegirls said, hey, girl, that man looking at you. And he said he was looking at my mama. And then my mama, you know, flirted with him. And the story goes on. And he says before you knew it, that he was a little bit of a square. That's just according to my pops. He said, you know, I was from St. Louis. And so I got in trouble in high school and had to go to the Army. And I was stuck in Vietnam in a war zone I knew nothing about. He says, I get out of this war zone and I meet your mama. And your mama is a young, hot thing running these Los Angeles streets. And she's fast. She understands street shit that I don't know nothing about. And next thing you know, we're running numbers and I got you in the car with your little diapers and I put all the heroin sacks in your diaper and we're running up and down Wilmington. Yeah, he said my diaper sack was one of the first stash spots. He said, yeah, because back then the police wasn't checking babies. Yeah, when they pull you over, they pull you out, check you, but they wasn't checking all in your baby's diapers. And so my pops said, yeah, because when they came back from Vietnam, the big thing was that heroin, that tar. Yeah, and all these guys knew something that the rest of the people didn't know. They knew this heroin game. And they was running around Compton with this heroin game. Now, I met a couple of my pops' old buddies. And they tell me some of these stories, and I share them with you moving forward. Different time, different episodes. But just to make it nice and simple, yeah, my mom and pops is running numbers and heroin up and down Wilmington. And they wind up moving from there when I'm like 1 year old to the original block. And this is where all my mom's best friends come into play, on the original block. Now, according to my Thea, when I listen to my Thea, she say none of them like my pops. Yeah, she said her and the homegirls, they used to always talk shit to my mom about my pops. They couldn't stand his ass. Yeah, they just didn't. We get into those stories later. Okay? Now, we all on the original block. My cousin Sherry, she comes from Ohio because my mom was always send me for the summer to Ohio to stay with her sister, my Aunt Pat. And so my cousin Sherry, one of these summers, she wind up coming back with us and she never went back. Yeah, she moved to the original block. Probably when she was like in the I want to say like the 10th grade. She moved to the original block. And she stayed with us. And down the street on the block was this Cuban family. Yeah. And it was this young teenager who became my cousin, this guy named Ruben. See, my cousin Sherry, when she moved to the block, she was the hottest young teenager on the block. My cousin Sherry, pretty light-skinned lady, girl back then. And this little Cuban dude, he had the hots for my cousin Sherry. He would always come to the door looking for my cousin, and he lived right, about a half a block up. And they wind up dating, falling in love. And let me tell you something. My cousin Sherry is married to that Cuban nigga to this day. Yeah, that's my cousin Ruben. They got all kind of kids. They live in North Carolina somewhere now. Shout out to them. Love them to death. But this is how they met. Now, see, the original block is describing how my life was before I even entered the block, and how when I entered the block, there was a set of girlfriends and family members that I had that my mom already had when I moved to the block. And see, a lot of these characters would come to the block to hang out. Little Wino and Robbie wind up being really tight. Jabs and Jolly was always on the block. Matter of fact, Jabs wind up hooking up my homeboy Jap with his homegirl later on in life, right? Which almost gets Jap's head knocked off. We're going to get into all that later on. You know what I mean? Because I was the one who took, J-Love and Jap and some of the homies over to see my cousin Jabs and my cousin Jolly, because they left the block early, the original block. See, let me break this down for y'all. See, on the original block, like I said, by the time I was 6, 7 years old, I left the original block and I moved to the block. And before I left the original block, my Aunt Gina already moved back to her mom's house in Compton. And I told you, my Aunt Terry already moved to another spot in Compton. See, my Aunt Gina, she lived in the pocket, right on the borderline of the pocket and Anzac, but basically in the pocket. And my cousin Terry had moved to the Tanner. So the only person left on the block was my cousin Terry, my auntie Terry, and my cousin Robbie. The only person left on the original block was my auntie Teresa, right, and her family, and then my cousin Sherry. Well, why was Sherry still on the original block? Because when we moved off the original block, my cousin Sherry wind up marrying that Cuban dude, my cousin Ruben, and they got an apartment right behind the block, the original block, because that's the area Ruben was comfortable with. And obviously Sherry was too, so they stayed on the original block. And for many years, although we moved to the block, now, let me clear this up. By the time we moved from the original block to the block, my mom and my dad, poof, they split up. That's another story we're going to share on another episode. Now, back to the story. Sherry, she stayed on the original block because her newly husband, he was from the original block and he was comfortable over there. And his mom and dad lived on the original block. I used to always go down there and, talk to them. They barely spoke English. They didn't even speak English. Yeah. And there was like some Afro-Cubans. It wasn't like, my cousin Ruben, he's an Afro-Cuban. If you saw him, you would just think he was a black nigga walking down the street. But he can speak Spanish. Yeah, don't get it twisted. That nigga can speak Spanish. But anyway, this is why we still had a connection to the original block. Me and my moms, we would always go back to the original block and see my auntie Teresa or go see my cousin Sherry, because at this point she had a son, my little cousin John, by this Cuban dude, right? By her husband at this point, because they got married and got their own apartment, right? So now, for many years, probably till I was about 10 years old, maybe 9 years old, we always went back to the original block, me and my family. Matter of fact, the original football game, see, I told y'all about the football game, the Century Blocks versus the Pine Streets, right? I taught y'all about that game. I got the touchdown, the game-winning touchdown, and I took off running on Stevie. But the original football game, I'm talking about, this football game is so original. This football game took place back. It's probably like 6-on-6. Yeah, it was the original block versus the new block. Yeah, most of y'all have never heard of this football game because you got to be a real OG. See, like I said, me and my family, we was on both blocks. We was new to the new block, and when we moved to the block, there were certain families already there. I believe Jap family was already there, Stanley was already there, Manny was already there, Miss Mary was already there, Miss Martha was already there, Suzette was already there, Martell probably was already there. It wasn't too many families there before us, but some of the families, I may be missing a couple, but them damn sure some of the families that was there when we moved to the block. And so Maestro will always come over to the block. And Maestro, through us, got to know some of the kids on the block. And we will always be outside playing football. And so Maestro, of course, I'm a little bitty kid, like, 7, 8 years old, maybe 9. And Maestro was telling some of the kids on the block, hey, why don't you guys pick up that football, and come play against some of the kids over from the original block. And I'm bragging. I'm like, yeah. Hey, Big J, you're going to have a problem because my cousin Michael, he fast like you. Because at this point, Big J nickname was the Flash. Yeah, we used to call him the Flash because he was the biggest, fastest athlete on the block. But see, on the original block, my cousin Michael and my cousin Jamal, they was the big, fast athletes on the block. And they were all like, young teenagers because they was all 5, 6, 7 years older than me. And so my Uncle Maestro, he whip up about 5 or 6 kids on the block. He put them all in his van. And he says, he tell all the parents, I'm going to take them all to the original block. And I'm going to have my sons and their friends play against these little kids. And we're going to get a football game going. And all the parents said, okay, he said, the winner's going to get soda pops. Yeah, see, back then, soda pops was on the line. And getting a soda pop was a big thing. So we all went to the park. And I'll never forget, it was my cousin Michael, Jamal, a couple of their friends, a couple of the original kids off the original block, and Big J and Tommy. And I don't even know if Jap played in this game. Jap might have played in it. I'm not sure. Jap going to have to tap in and let me know. But this was an epic game. I mean, this game went on for a long time. Big James was showing out. Michael and Jamal was showing out. To be honest with you, I don't remember who won the game. I remember Maestro showing up with a bag full of soda pops. Yeah, he should, because he had left. Because we was playing, we was little kids. Most of us couldn't tackle the older kids. We were just out there playing. Yeah, and we was playing I don't think we was playing touch. I think we was playing tackle football. Yeah, this might have been a tackle football game. And this is probably like 1980. Yeah, this is probably 1980. The original hood football game, the block versus the old block. And was all said and done, Maestro, he had those soda pops. He did. He had those soda pops because I had the pineapple. Yeah, I had that tall one with the long neck. See, back then, there was a few things that don't pop off no more. Let me teach y'all about the original block. See, the original block, outside of sodas and regular shit kids like, what we really like, we like puffin stuff and we like Pioneer chicken. Yeah, see, we didn't fuck with no Taco Bell. We didn't fuck with no Del Taco. We didn't fuck with no KFC. None of that shit. No. We fucked with puffin stuff. That was our original, Del Taco, our original Taco Bell. It was puffin stuff. Oh, we wanted some Pioneer fried chicken. Now, I know y'all ain't never heard of Pioneer. Y'all fuck with that nasty ass KFC. But see, we fuck with Pioneer Chicken. And see, when the game was all said and done, Maestro, he bought us some soda pops, and he took us to Pioneer Chicken. Yeah, see, that's back when Pioneer Chicken was popping. All of us, we went to Pioneer Chicken. We all got little 2 pieces of chicken with little French fries, and we all ate. The old block and the new block, Big J, T-Guns, Jamal, Michael, Danny Boy was there. Cause remember, Danny Boy, he's from the original block too, and his family lived there. And then he moved to the new block. You know what I mean? So this was the original football game, the old block versus the new block. I don't remember who won. I do remember we got Pioneer Chicken and we got soda pop when it was all said and done, and that's the only thing that counted. I got many more stories to come. Don't worry. If I haven't brought you up, you're coming up soon. This will be the end of Curb Service. The original block, episode 1, raw and unedited. Get your popcorn ready. There's more to come.